Hi, I'm the daughter my family erased. They said I didn't belong, told neighbors I was unstable, left my name out of everything. At my own father's funeral, my sister laughed when I walked in. But then the lawyer opened the will and said my name. The whole room froze. Want to know why? Before we begin, what time are you listening and where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. Because this isn't just a family drama. It's the moment silence became power. The mirror was cracked, not broken. That's how I felt too, looking at myself in the bathroom of a roadside motel that smelled faintly of mildew and long-forgotten dreams. The fluorescent light overhead flickered as I traced the reflection of a wrinkle near my eye, wondering how it got there. How many years of silence, of holding things in, carved that line? I remembered being 5, clutching my teddy bear, crying over a scraped knee. My father wiped my tears and said softly, "You're my brave girl." I'd believed him, back then. The funeral home sat on the edge of town, all beige brick and manicured hedges, like grief could be boxed up and made polite. I stepped inside, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Heads turned, then turned away. A cousin coughed into her sleeve and avoided eye contact. My mother froze mid-conversation, her spine going rigid like a board. And then came Callista. She didn't just smile, she smirked. "Oh, you came," she said, her tone so sugary it stung. She looked flawless, of course. That perfect chignon, that designer dress in a shade of navy that cost more than my car's transmission. I didn't answer. I just nodded, walked quietly past rows of floral arrangements, and took a seat in the back, where the forgotten people sat. I noticed the pews had been reshuffled since my last time here, back when I was still Odessa, the good daughter. Before I opened my mouth, before everything changed. 3 years ago, I found tax documents with my name on them. Documents I never signed. Accounts I never opened. Money I never touched. My father had used my social security number to shift funds from the family business. I confronted him in his study, shaking but determined. He didn't deny it. Instead, he stared at me like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. "You'll ruin this family," he hissed. "You want us to be audited, to lose everything?" I said I wouldn't lie for him, that I wouldn't go down with the ship. That night, my bags were on the porch before I even finished dinner. Callista had already set the stage. She told anyone who'd listen that I'd been struggling, that I'd seen a therapist once in college. She called it a pattern of instability. Suddenly, I wasn't the daughter with a spine. I was the unhinged one, the black sheep, the drama queen. Back in the chapel, she passed me holding the folded paper that was clearly her eulogy. She paused just long enough to whisper, "Try not to embarrass yourself." I didn't look up. I didn't need to. I knew that tone, that smugness. That way she relished being the center of attention. If you've ever been erased from your own family, I thought, you know how loud silence can be. It echoes in the spaces you used to fill, in the names that aren't called, in the chairs no one saves for you. The casket stood beneath a window that let in a sliver of pale morning light. Next to it, on a small velvet-draped table, was a mahogany pen with a gold tip. My father's. He used to say, "Only sign what's worth remembering." I stared at it longer than I meant to. Funny what people choose to preserve. Then, just as the minister cleared his throat and Callista prepared to rise, a man in a charcoal suit stepped forward from the corner of the room. He held a folded paper in his hand and spoke with the careful tone of someone used to delivering bad news. "Before we continue," he said, "there is a letter to be read aloud, addressed to Odessa." Gasps whispered through the pews like wind through dry leaves. I felt 20 pairs of eyes snap toward me, and not one of them was kind. I felt every gaze in the room snap toward me, none of them kind, not even curious, just cold. And then the lawyer unfolded the letter, clearing his throat as if he was about to deliver a verdict. His voice was steady, but each word sliced through the air like glass. "To my daughter Odessa, if she dares show her face." A collective gasp cut through the chapel. A few relatives leaned forward as if they hadn't already devoured every whisper about me over the years. I didn't flinch, but my fists curled inside my lap, nails biting into skin. Callista turned halfway in her seat, lips twitching in amusement. She didn't bother hiding it. Of course she didn't. I want the truth remembered, the letter continued. Odessa betrayed this family in our most difficult hour. When I needed support, when we were under scrutiny, she ran. She chose outsiders over blood. She turned her back on me during the IRS inquiry and then vanished, leaving shame in her place. I didn't hear the rest right away. My ears were buzzing. I blinked once, then again, trying to process the wave of humiliation. People were whispering now, barely, because why bother hiding what they thought they already knew? Betrayed the family? I let out a slow breath. No, I remembered exactly what happened. I didn't betray anyone. I told the truth. Funny how they always call it betrayal when you stop covering for them. I'd been the one who discovered the inconsistencies, unreported income, shady shell transactions, all linked to the family business. It wasn't even accidental. He'd used my name, my accounts, to make it harder to trace. When I asked him why, he said flat out, "You don't understand how things work, Odessa. Just sign." I didn't, so he rewrote the story. He claimed I was unstable, told my mother I had been spiraling for years, showed her an old therapy bill from college, something I'd gone through after a breakup, as if it were proof I was incapable of reason. He said I was emotional, overreacting. He said I needed help, and she believed him, or maybe she wanted to. "You can't keep coming between us," she told me that day. "You're not well, and he's trying to protect the family." That night, the locks on the front door were changed. I lost my job a week later. The firm said they didn't want to be connected to an IRS investigation. My name had made the local paper in the vaguest of terms, enough to cast doubt, not enough to prove anything. I left town with 2 suitcases, a drained savings account, and silence from every person I once called family. Now here I was, back in the same town, sitting in the back row while my father slandered me from beyond the grave. The only thing colder than the air in the chapel was the look in my mother's eyes. She met my gaze once, and it was like staring into glass. There was no flicker of recognition, no trace of a woman who once read me bedtime stories or taught me to tie my shoes. "It's like I never existed," I whispered. Aunt Rachel, who used to sneak me lemon drops in church, picked up her purse and shifted a seat away. The physical rejection stung more than I expected. I didn't blame her. The whole town had probably heard the version where I was the unstable daughter who wrecked everything for attention. I looked again at the casket and the table beside it, and froze. The mahogany pen was gone. It had been there when I walked in, lying beside the folded flag and framed photo. Now, just empty velvet. I swallowed hard, remembering his voice again, this time calm, not cruel. "Never sign what you don't believe in." What did it mean? Had he changed something before he died? Did someone take the pen for a reason? The lawyer refolded the letter with a crisp finality, then looked back out at the crowd. A hush fell again. You could feel the judgment in the room thick as fog, but something in his expression shifted. His tone, too. "However," he said slowly, deliberately, "that's not the document I'm here to execute today." A murmur rustled through the pews. Callista turned sharply, brows knitting in confusion. My mother leaned slightly forward, her first visible reaction since I arrived. Something was off. Something had changed. A hush spread across the room like a winter draft. The lawyer placed the previously read letter aside and pulled out another envelope. Thicker, sealed with a crimson wax stamp. "This is the final legally binding will," he said calmly. "Signed, notarized, and submitted one day prior to Mr. Kent's passing." He opened it slowly. My heart pounded so loud I was sure people nearby could hear it. I braced for another public blow, but what came next didn't sting. It stunned. "Odessa Kent," he read, "is hereby named sole executor and beneficiary of my private account and restricted trust." The room exploded. I didn't move. My breathing leveled for the first time all morning, but I didn't smile, not even inside. I simply stared forward, letting the noise crash around me like ocean waves. Callista's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered against the marble floor. A few people gasped. Others murmured. One cousin muttered under her breath, "You've got to be kidding." Callista surged to her feet. "This is a joke," she barked. "He changed the will. I was there. He made it clear who was supposed to handle things. She wasn't even speaking to him." The lawyer didn't blink. "This version was notarized the night before his heart attack. It overrides all previous documents." I turned to look at Callista then, not with glee, not even satisfaction, just clarity. Her face twisted into something between rage and fear. My mother stood, smoothed the hem of her dress, and walked out. No words, no glance back. I heard the sharp click of her heels all the way down the hall until the double doors thudded shut. "She doesn't deserve it," someone mumbled behind me. I didn't bother turning around to see who. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like something colder, like standing alone on a road I'd begged to be let back onto, only to find the gates unlocked long after I'd stopped knocking. Needing air, I rose quietly and slipped into the hallway. The low murmur from inside faded as I put distance between us. The scent of lilies lingered, mixed with old wood and polish. My chest tightened, not from pride, from grief, a twisted kind. I leaned against the cool wall, eyes shut. The last time I spoke to him had been outside the hospital. He was sitting in the front seat of his truck, refusing to meet my eyes. I had tried, truly tried, to warn him. "You don't see it, do you?" I told him. "She's not helping you. She's using you." His hand stayed locked on the steering wheel. "She's family," he muttered. "You're just angry because she got what you didn't." He thought I was jealous of Callista's charm, her ease, her grip on him. "You'll regret this," I had whispered. "Not because of me, because the people you trust will ruin everything." He drove off without saying another word. The memory dragged my gaze downward, to the faint scar on my left wrist. A cruel souvenir from a night when everything had closed in too tight, a time when I believed I had no one, no voice, no future. I exhaled. No tears. Not anymore. "Miss Kent." I turned. A man in a gray suit stood a few feet away, a familiar uncertainty in his eyes. "I didn't mean to startle you," he added. "But I think you might not remember me." I studied him. He was in his mid-60s with thinning hair and a face that looked like it had spent years watching other people's storms from behind a desk. "I'm Tom Barrett. I was your father's attorney before everything. Before the scandal. Before the IRS. Before the lies swallowed me whole." "You're the one who helped set up the original trust," I said quietly. He gave a small nod. "And the one who warned him not to put so much control in your sister's hands. Why didn't you say anything when all this started?" His gaze dropped. "I tried, but he wouldn't listen. Callista made sure of that. After the audit, he didn't want to face what he'd done to you. But he never stopped watching. He asked about you often, through friends, sometimes through me." I didn't know what to say. "He was a complicated man," Tom added. "Too proud, too stubborn. But this, he meant this." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope, yellowed, hand-addressed, sealed carefully. "He gave this to me 2 weeks ago, told me, only if she comes." My fingers trembled as I took it, the weight of it, heavier than paper should be. "He wrote it himself?" I asked. Tom nodded once. Shaking hands, but yes, he did. I didn't open it immediately. I just stood there, breathing it in. A message from the one man who destroyed and defined me all at once. Then I peeled it open and gasped. Inside was something I hadn't seen in over a decade, my father's handwriting, shaking but unmistakable. The loops were still tight, the pressure uneven. I stepped outside the double doors again, this time to the far edge of the funeral home's covered walkway. The early sun had risen fully now, casting long shadows across the grass. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the letter. "Odessa, if you're reading this, then I suppose the end came before I had the courage to say any of it out loud." I blinked hard. "I know I failed you. Not just once, but in 1,000 quiet ways. You asked questions no one else did. That scared me. I mistook your courage for defiance, your truth for threat. I thought keeping the family whole meant keeping you outside it." Each word hit like a stone in water, rippling through everything I'd tried to bury. "Callista. She said you were unstable. Dangerous, even. I wanted to believe she was wrong, but part of me, maybe the cowardly part, believed her. It was easier than facing what I did to you, easier than facing what I allowed her to become. My nails dug into the paper as my hands tightened. But if you're holding this now, maybe it means you came. Maybe it means you stood your ground after all these years. If so, take back what was always yours. And forgive me. If not for what I did, then for what I should have done. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was something I never expected, an acknowledgement, a glimmer of truth from a man who'd let lies fester in the silence between us. The wind shifted. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into my coat pocket, near my chest, where it pressed against something deeper than bone. I found myself pulled into memory. It was 3 nights before he died. I'd heard from a nurse friend at Mercy General that he was in for cardiac monitoring. I'd gone straight from my shift, still in scrubs, heart in my throat. Callista met me in the corridor outside his room. Her hair was perfect, her perfume sharp. She didn't look surprised to see me. "He doesn't want to see you," she said, low and even, holding the visitor list like a weapon. "He asked me to keep you away, said you'd only cause a scene." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I remember just nodding, backing away, heart sinking. I thought I had time. I thought maybe I'd come back the next morning and things would be different. I never got the chance. Back in the present, I stepped into the building again. The service room had thinned out. Most of the distant cousins and awkward neighbors had made polite exits. But the core circle lingered. Callista was holding court at the center, flanked by 2 aunts and a second cousin I barely recognized. Her voice was performative, laced with edge. She pressured Dad, clearly. He was medicated. I mean, what kind of person shows up after years of silence and walks away with the trust? Their heads bobbed in agreement. I walked past the front pews, past the lingering scent of lilies and wood polish, and placed the letter, folded neatly, on the serving table beside the memorial flowers. "I didn't pressure him," I said, loud enough for the nearby ears, but still steady. Callista's gaze snapped to the envelope. "What is that?" "His words," I replied, in ink, in his hand. She reached for it, but one of the aunts, Aunt Nadine, Dad's cousin, picked it up first. Her eyes scanned the signature at the bottom. "That's his writing," she murmured. Silence followed, thick and unsteady. A few people stepped back. Someone whispered, "He really wrote her." I didn't wait for the ripple effect. I turned and walked out. This time, I didn't need fresh air. I just didn't need their faces, their judgment, their rewrites of what happened and who I was. They weren't there when I needed them, not when I was dragged out of the house in the middle of the night. Not when the tabloids printed rumors Callista leaked. Not when I couldn't pay rent and had to sleep in my car for a week. And I sure as hell didn't need them now. In the quiet of the side lobby, I sat on the edge of a bench, letting the sounds of muffled voices and distant organ music fade behind thick walls. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. It was a new email from the trust administrator's office. Subject line, "Filing initiated. Transfer of controlling interest, Bundy Trust." The floor didn't tilt, but my spine stiffened like it had braced for something tectonic. I stared at the subject line until the letters blurred. My hands hovered above the keyboard for a moment, then clicked the email open. There it was, confirmation from the trust office. The Bundy Trust had been reopened and re-registered, listing me, Odessa Elaine Bundy, as a co-trustee. For a second, the air in my apartment felt thin. At first, I assumed it had to be some administrative glitch, but as I read further, a single paragraph made my throat tighten. Pursuant to Clause 11(c) of the 2011 Private Estate Addendum, and in the absence of any valid revocation document, Miss Odessa Bundy remains a named fiduciary party with full access and voting authority. Notification has been delivered to all relevant stakeholders. He left it in. My father never removed my name, not out of sentiment, surely. More likely, he forgot, or maybe he expected me to stay gone forever. Callista must have banked on it. She counted on my absence being permanent. It wasn't. The next morning, I stepped off the elevator into the trust firm's marble-floored lobby in downtown Denver. The scent of paper and old coffee lingered in the air. Familiar. unchanging. The receptionist recognized my name and gave a small, courteous nod before guiding me toward a glass-walled conference room. Inside waited a man in his 60s, crisp gray suit, horn-rimmed glasses, hands folded over a manila folder. "Miss Bundy," he said, standing. "I'm Richard Langley. I handled portions of your father's estate transitions in the early 2010s. We shook hands. His grip was firm but brief. "You've read the email?" he asked, gesturing for me to sit. "I have." "Well," he said gently, "the clause was never officially revoked. Your father had drafted an amendment in 2018, removing you as successor trustee, but it was never signed, let alone filed. So legally, you are," he nodded, "still a fiduciary of the Bundy Trust, with full rights, including voting shares and asset oversight." He paused, then reached into his folder and slid something across the table toward me. A small black flash drive in a clear plastic bag. "This was found in your father's private desk drawer, in a compartment locked separately from the rest. It's dated roughly 10 months ago. I haven't listened to it, but based on the metadata, it's a voice memo, audio only." "Why give this to me?" He exhaled. He left a note attached. It simply said, "For Odessa, only if she comes back." I thanked him, took the flash drive, and left. Back in my apartment, I didn't sit. I paced. I poured a glass of water I never drank. Then I plugged the drive into my old laptop and clicked open the file. The sound crackled faintly. Then his voice filled the room. "I kept the lie going too long," he said, voice gravelly, breathless. "You were my daughter first. I forgot that. I let others convince me you were dangerous, that you'd ruin everything. But you were just telling the truth. The damn truth." I froze. I believed Callista because she showed me what I thought was proof. A video of you shouting, crying, accusing me. She said you were unstable, that you were trying to take us down. But later, I realized she edited it. She clipped the part where I told you to leave, where I threatened to cut you off if you didn't back down. There was a silence. I could hear him coughing in the background. I kept saying I'd fix it, but I didn't. I waited too long. The audio ended there. I didn't cry. I just stood there, hands limp at my sides, until the laptop screen dimmed. Later that evening, I opened the remaining folder stored on the flash drive. It contained a single scanned document, barely legible but clearly notarized. It revoked Callista's sole authority over the trust. My name again restored beside his. The date? 2 weeks before his heart gave out. He tried. He really tried. Too late to repair what was broken, but enough to leave cracks in the walls Callista had built. I stood by the window, Denver's skyline barely visible through low clouds. Years of silence collapsed into a moment of stillness. "I'm not here for revenge," I whispered to my reflection in the glass. "But I'm not leaving this time either." Then the phone rang. Unknown number. I picked it up. Callista's voice came through, sharp and cold. "I hope you're not planning to show up at the board meeting Friday. You'll regret it if you do." I didn't answer. I just stared at my calendar. Friday was circled in red, a thick, confident loop in my father's own handwriting. The call ended, but her voice didn't leave. It echoed in my apartment like a threat pinned to the walls. I stared at the phone in my hand, replaying the words, not because I needed to, but because they had lodged themselves somewhere between my collarbone and my stomach. "I hope you're not planning to show up at the board meeting Friday. You'll regret it." There was something about how calmly she said it, that cold certainty, like someone who's never had to clean up after the messes they made, because someone else always did. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter, took a step back, then leaned against the fridge. The hum of its motor was the only sound in the room. I stood there for I don't know how long, long enough for my legs to ache. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part just wanted to disappear. What was I still doing here? It wasn't the fight I was tired of. It was being hated by the people who were supposed to love me. That night, sleep stayed away. I tossed between the couch and the bed, trying to think of anything else. I couldn't. So I let my mind do what it always did when I was too tired to resist. It drifted back to that night, junior year of college, the night I tried to forget for so long. The envelope with the scholarship offer had come in the mail that afternoon. It was a full ride. Every credit, every semester covered. I had worked for it. Stayed late in the labs, tutored struggling kids, kept my GPA above 3.9 while juggling 2 part-time jobs. When I walked into the living room holding the envelope, Mom was folding laundry. Callista was perched on the armrest of Dad's recliner, scrolling through her phone. I barely said anything, just held up the letter with a quiet smile. "I got it." She glanced up, her eyes narrowed. "You got what?" "The full scholarship, biotech fellowship." Something in her face shifted, like a switch flipped the wrong way. She stood slowly, walked toward me with a stillness that made the air tense. "You always have to make everything about you, don't you?" I was just... And then the vase flew. It shattered against the far wall behind me. Pieces skittered across the floor like tiny knives. Water from the hydrangeas soaked into the carpet. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just looked down at the shards near my feet. Mom rushed in and grabbed Callista's arm, not to scold her, just to pull her away. "Don't provoke her like that, Odessa," Mom said sharply. "You know how she gets." I remember blinking at her. That's all I did. Blink. "She's upset. That's all. Your silence is your best weapon right now." That night, I packed for school with a towel pressed to the bruise on my upper arm. I left early the next morning before anyone else was awake. In the present, it was close to midnight when I got up from bed and wandered over to the boxes stacked near the closet, the ones I hadn't touched since moving in. I opened the one labeled Dad Misk and started digging through old notebooks and his cracked leather planner. At the bottom, tucked in a corner behind a faded photo album, was something wrapped in a dish towel. I unwrapped it carefully. The vase, the same one from that night, cracked in 3 places, one side dulled by time but still intact. Someone had taped it back together, sloppily, the flowers long gone. Inside it, a folded note. The handwriting was unmistakable. Silence helped once, but not always. I sat down slowly, the note trembling in my hand. He remembered. That night, the words Mom had said. And maybe, in his quiet way, he had been trying to say something different now. All these years I'd thought silence was dignity. That swallowing pain gave me strength. But what it really gave was power, to people like Callista. It took that cracked vase to make me feel it, deep down in the hollow space where my confidence used to be. But just as quickly as it stirred, that heat fizzled. I was so tired in a way sleep didn't fix. Maybe it was easier to just not go. Let her keep the board, the trust, the narrative. I'd lived this long without any of it. Did it really matter anymore? I slumped onto the floor next to the open box. The vase sat beside me. Its seams looked more visible in the lamplight. My phone buzzed. I reached for it out of habit. A direct message, from Lila, a girl I mentored years ago in a local STEM outreach program. She'd been 14 when we met, scared to speak in class, brilliant but so unsure. Her message was short. "You told me to speak up, even when my voice shook. You okay?" I read it twice. My fingers hovered over the screen, unsure what to type. And then, without thinking, I wrote, "I'm about to speak." Friday morning arrived in a gray, quiet haze. I rode the elevator to the 27th floor of Phoenix Bioworks with my hands tucked into my coat pockets and my heart deliberately slowed. I wasn't calm, but I was steady, and for me, that was enough. The door slid open with a soft chime, and I stepped into the glass-paneled lobby outside the boardroom. Inside, voices murmured, low, clipped, too polite to be genuine. As I entered the room, chairs shifted. Heads turned. Several board members blinked in confusion. One of the junior partners, Jalen, if I remembered correctly, whispered something to the woman beside him. I caught fragments. "She's back?" "I thought she..." Callista sat at the far end of the table, legs crossed, arms loose at her sides. She didn't look at me, but her fingers were drumming a quick, unsteady beat against the lacquered tabletop. I took the open seat directly across from her. "Morning," I said to the room, calm, even. Callista's hand stilled. She cleared her throat. "Let's proceed. I'll start with a clarification." She pulled out a folder, opened it, and slid a printed document to the center of the table. "This," she said, "is a signed resignation letter from Odessa Bundy, dated 3 years ago, relinquishing all operational and fiduciary responsibilities. For legal clarity, I've had it notarized last month." Someone nodded. Another adjusted his tie. I didn't reach for the paper. I didn't even look at it. Instead, I said, "Interesting. You didn't think I'd come." Callista's lips tightened just slightly. "You signed this. Are you denying that?" I said, still not touching the paper. "I'm saying let's watch the clip." I pulled a small flash drive from my bag and set it on the table, nudging it toward the AV port near the chairperson's laptop. The room went still. "I asked for permission to share this in advance," I added, eyes still on Callista. "HR has already reviewed it." The chair gave a small nod. "Proceed." The screen on the far wall blinked to life. For a second, static. Then, a clear view of the third-floor admin office. A week ago. Callista stood next to her assistant, Marcy. They were at the print station, laughing. Marcy clicked through documents on screen. Callista leaned in, tapped something. Then, a sheet printed. Callista picked it up, looked at it, smirked. The camera caught her saying, "Her signature's easy. I used to sign her parent-teacher notes in high school." Laughter. She pulled a pen from her purse and signed the bottom. Marcy scanned it back in. Silence fell over the boardroom. I didn't look at the screen. I'd seen it already. Too many times. What I watched was Callista. Her nails curled in against her palm. The color drained from her cheeks. For once, her mouth stayed shut. The chair leaned forward. "Is this?" One member, older, balding, leaned back with a sigh. "Is that even legal?" Another. "That's criminal." Callista finally broke her silence. "It was a joke. We didn't submit it. You can't prove—" "It was attached to the resignation file in the internal archive," I said, cutting in. "Timestamped with metadata. I have that too." I let the silence stretch. Then I turned back to the table. I didn't want to come back to a war. I really didn't. But I also won't leave my name behind. Not like that. They watched me now. Some curious, some wary, a few ashamed. "I was co-founder of Phoenix Bioworks," I continued, voice steady. "I'm the author on 2 of our key patents. I managed our first clinical trial and negotiated the initial round of angel investment that got us off the ground. You can dislike me, but you don't get to erase me." Callista tried to interject, but I raised my hand, not angrily, just to finish the thought. "I'm not asking for sympathy, but I am invoking Clause 4, 3.3 of the company bylaws." Now, real panic bloomed. The chair sat up straighter. "That clause hasn't been touched since—" "It's still valid," I said. "And it's simple. If a founding member is removed through fraudulent action or coercion, the board must vote to initiate a financial and procedural audit. Immediately." No one moved. I reached into my bag and pulled out a copy of the clause, signed and dated by all founding members, including Callista. The chair read it aloud. When he finished, he set the paper down carefully and looked around the table. "I'm calling an emergency vote." I didn't look at Callista. There was no satisfaction in it now, no venom. She'd carved her own path long ago. I just stopped stepping aside for it. Hands were raised. 7 out of 9. The motion passed. Callista sat frozen. Not protesting. Just quiet. I stood, collected my bag, and nodded once. They could keep the room. I had what mattered again. My name. By Saturday morning, the boardroom had been sealed off for audit compliance. I arrived early, before the lawyers, before the auditors, before anyone could say something rehearsed. From the outside, it looked quiet. Inside, too, the blinds were drawn, the lights dimmed low, but the silence was uneasy, like a smile that doesn't reach the eyes. I barely had time to sit before my phone buzzed. Subject line: clarification needed on financial discrepancies, media inquiry. I frowned. Attached was a PDF, a press release timestamped at 11:38 p.m. the night before, released by Phoenix's own PR division. I scanned it quickly, my heart sinking into my stomach. Phoenix Bioworks is aware of an internal investigation regarding a former executive potentially misappropriating funds during fiscal year 2021-2022. The matter was brought forward via an anonymous tip and is currently under review. Former executive. Anonymous tip. The wording was careful, sterile, but it screamed accusation, and the only former executive on everyone's lips right now was me. I stepped into the hallway and pulled out my earpiece. As soon as I connected to the company Slack, my worst suspicion landed with a blow to the gut. Entire threads filled with people tagging my name. Some were cautious, some cruel. Did anyone else hear about this years ago? I always thought she left too suddenly. Is this why Callista had to clean up so much mess? No one had even asked me. No one needed to. I closed the app and gripped the phone tight enough to feel the bones shift in my hand. My breath came shallow, like I was back in that hospital hallway, watching my father's door close in my face. Shut out again. Lied about again. For a moment, I turned toward the exit. This isn't worth it, I thought. You're not built for this fight. And then, like a reflex from a life long before Callista's name had weight, I heard my father's voice from somewhere in memory. Calm, low, spoken across a dark porch one summer when I'd come home sobbing from a failed science competition. They'll hit you hardest when you're closest to beating them. It had sounded like an excuse then. Now, it felt like warning. I turned back inside. One of the junior legal associates was setting up files near the window. He gave me a wary nod. Sympathetic, maybe. I walked past him, slid my bag onto the table, and opened the front pocket. At the very top, almost forgotten, was the wooden nameplate, Odessa Bundy, co-founder. I held it in my palm for a long minute, the same one Grandpa had carved with his own hands the summer I turned 23. Back then, I'd kept it on my desk like armor. It had been buried for years, first in a drawer, then under years of silence. I placed it on the legal table, centered it, let them see it, let them remember. By 10:30, the internal legal team and the audit firm were assembled. The room felt colder now, sterile with tension. They asked me if I had any opening remarks. I'd like to submit additional evidence, I said, sliding over a printed packet and a USB stick. The lead auditor raised an eyebrow. Regarding the press allegations? No, I said calmly, regarding a legal conspiracy to provoke those allegations. I opened the presentation from the USB drive. On screen, a string of emails between Callista and a private attorney from 2 months ago. The thread started with, "Contingency plan in case she reappears." The rest was worse. Lines about media leverage, about legal rumors, no need for proof, just pressure. One file was a draft of the very press release issued the night before, and at the bottom of the last email, "She won't fight. She never does." A beat of silence filled the room. Papers stopped shuffling. Coffee cups were slowly set down. The head of corporate legal leaned forward. "These are real?" "They were recovered from my father's encrypted drive," I said. "Time-stamped, chain-verified. You can call the forensic team." Someone at the far end whispered, "This is premeditated." The firm's general counsel looked at me directly. "Would you like to file a countersuit for defamation and breach of fiduciary duty?" I shook my head. "No, I just want it known. I don't need to take anything from her. I just want the lies to stop." He nodded slowly. "It'll be entered into the record." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. My fingers hovered for a moment over the keys. Then I typed, quickly, precisely. Statement from Odessa Bundy. "I have no interest in revenge, only truth. Let the records reflect what was done. I'm not here to bury anyone, but I won't let anyone bury me either." I sent it. No edits, no emotion. Let them interpret it how they wanted, but it was mine. As the legal team began drafting responses, one of the interns walked over with a glass of water and placed it quietly next to me. "I saw what they wrote," she murmured, eyes averted. "We've been rooting for you. All of us who didn't have a last name that opened doors." I blinked, then nodded. Words didn't come easily right then. Outside, the press hadn't left. The cameras were still waiting. The story wasn't over. But the truth was out. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to be seen. A week passed. Not loudly, not triumphantly, just quietly. Like a room slowly exhaling after years of holding its breath. It was Sunday morning, and I found myself sitting in Grandpa's old study. The windows were cracked open, letting in a soft breeze that smelled faintly of pine and morning coffee. Dust motes floated like lazy fireflies in the light. The nameplate, my nameplate now, sat solidly at the center of the desk. It felt less like a symbol and more like a root, something that held. There had been no word from Callista since the vote. No apology, no denial, just an absence that, for once, felt like a gift. Our mother had left town abruptly, citing the need for space and sun. She texted me once. It read, "You got what you wanted. Let it rest." I didn't respond. I had learned painfully that closure is a myth when it relies on people who never saw you in the first place. Some truths don't arrive wrapped in forgiveness. Some just settle into place like old furniture, undeniable, unmoved. I had started sorting through old files, not looking for anything in particular, just clearing space, I guess. Grandpa had always kept meticulous records, hand-labeled folders from decades past, receipts from stores that didn't even exist anymore. It was when I reached to dust behind the built-in bookshelf that I felt something shift. The back panel was loose. Tucked behind it, aged and yellowed with time, was a small envelope, sealed. My name written in the same strong block letters Grandpa used when carving wood. I sat down before opening it. My fingers shook, not from fear, but from recognition. He'd written this for a version of me he never got to speak to. "If you're reading this, you stayed, and that's why I left it all to you." I blinked. A slow, stinging pressure filled my throat. They all thought being loud meant being strong. But I saw you. You never begged. You never screamed. You watched. You endured. That's a power too many dismiss. And I'm sorry I didn't say it sooner. The family broke itself trying to silence you. I hope you'll build something better. I didn't cry. Not right away. I folded the letter, pressed it flat, and tucked it inside the bottom drawer. Later that afternoon, I walked out to the backyard, mug in hand, still thinking about his words. The old garden chair, the one with the cracked slat, sat where it always had, half sunk into the earth. Years ago, it was where Grandpa used to sit and read or carve, sometimes both. I didn't want to toss it out, so I wheeled it into the garage and grabbed a few tools. A neighbor boy, Miles, around 10, full of curiosity and missing teeth, had been biking circles in his driveway. When he saw me sanding down the frame, he skidded to a stop and called out, "You building something?" "Fixing something," I said. "Can I help?" He held a steady grip on the chair leg while I reattached the wooden slat with fresh screws. I let him tighten the last one. The satisfaction on his face made me smile. "It yours?" he asked, running his hand along the smooth finish. "No," I said, "but it's ready for someone who needs it." That evening, I placed the restored chair under the oak tree. I didn't need to sit in it. It wasn't meant for me. It was a seat I'd make sure no one had to fight for again. By Monday, I had reopened an old domain name I used to own, quietseed.org. Years ago, I dreamed of creating a space for women with ideas but no backing. Life had gotten in the way. But now, the idea didn't feel so distant. I didn't post ads or launch a campaign. I just sent a few messages to women I'd met over the years, young, determined, under-resourced. We started with 3, then 5, then more. We'd meet at my house in the study. No stage, no pitches, just stories, honesty, kindness. One girl, barely out of high school, looked at me one afternoon and said, "You don't say much, but when you do, it feels like it matters." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded and smiled. Because that felt more real than any corporate title ever had. The news stopped calling. The press moved on. Phoenix restructured quietly, as corporations always do. Callista was no longer listed on the board. She'd been transitioned. Her LinkedIn profile called it a sabbatical. Her silence, for once, was strategic. I wasn't looking to replace her, or anyone. I just wanted to stop apologizing for being the kind of woman who notices things, remembers things, doesn't need the last word, but knows when the silence is hers to break. Sometimes I sit at Grandpa's desk and run my fingers along the wood grain of the nameplate. It's just a piece of carved oak. But each groove reminds me. Someone saw me, even if only quietly, even if too late. I didn't win them back. I didn't need to. I won back myself. And this nameplate? It's just wood. But every time I sit here, I remember who refused to leave. And maybe that's what led